Today's video are scary true stories that are based around someone being in your house, under your bed, in your closet, or in your attic. No, those aren't squirrels up there. There's a dude, and he's gonna get you. So everybody sit back, relax, and enjoy. Also hit that like button, or dislike button. So there was this guy in my closet I'd like to not meet again, but I'll start from the beginning and we can go from there. The first time I came face to face with this strange man was about 7 years ago. It was a normal summer day. Now I didn't have a terrible childhood, but I didn't have a great one either. My mother was struggling to make ends meet, and we lived in a really crappy 2-bedroom house. It was my mother, her boyfriend, my 2 younger brothers, and myself. My mom worked nights, and so did her boyfriend, so it was up to me to watch my 2 brothers in the evening. It was just like any other normal summer day at first. My friends and I hung out during the day, walked around our small town, and enjoyed the warm weather. Now, for it being a small town, there's still plenty to do. Walk through the woods, go to the park, all of the typical kids things. We decided to waste time at the park until I had to go home and watch my brothers. It was normal boring stuff. We walked around, played with a basketball that someone left behind, sat on the swings and talked about our lives and what we were going to do when we got older. It was nearing 3 p.m. when I noticed a guy sitting on the bench over by the basketball court. Now, it was nearing the time for me to go home anyways, and as the man was giving me and my friend both the odd vibe, we decided to leave. As we neared Main Street, which my house also happened to be on, we parted ways. I got home, and my mother lets me know that there's leftovers for the boys and myself, and then she's on her way to work. We spend most of the days indoors, watching TV or playing video games. Around 7:30, my brothers wanted to go outside to ride their bikes. It's just now getting dark, so I agree. They ride their bikes for a half hour. I'm sitting on the curb looking at my phone, texting my friend about how bored I am, when my youngest brother, who must have been around 7 at the time, comes up to me and points over towards our house. I look just in time to see what looked like a man walk inside. I immediately tell my brothers not to worry and continue riding their bikes as I call my mother, letting her know what just happened. She calls the police and they show up within 5 minutes, seeing that the police station is only a few blocks away. They do a full search of the home but find nothing. They speak to my mother on the phone and tell her there's nothing there and it must have just been our imaginations. Tentatively, my brothers and I go back into the house. So I sit them down and turn on the TV. Time flies and I look up and it's already 9:30 and I really got to get them to bed soon. I head upstairs to go into our closet. All 3 of us share one bedroom, so all of our clothes are in one closet. I turn the closet light on and start digging through a pile of clothes on the floor that we never got around to putting away. I hear a noise that sounds like a deep breath. Thinking it was just my imagination, I continue to pull out pajamas for my brothers. I grab their PJs and go to pull the string to turn off the lights. Out of the corner of my eye, I see movement. I look over and see a face peering out of the large pile of clothes. There's a man hiding under our clothes in the closet. He made a sudden movement, and I booked it. I take off running. I can hear him struggling to get out of the clothes, and I didn't stop running. Down the hallway, down the stairs, knocking anything over in the process, in hopes of slowing him down. I burst into the living room and grab my brother's arms, practically pulling them out of the sockets in an attempt to drag them out of the house. We were outside and 3 blocks away before I quit dragging them behind me. I reached for my phone to call the police, but it's not in my pocket. I must have left it on the couch. So we hoofed it. I drag my brothers behind me in the middle of the night. They are tired, and they don't know what happened, and I won't tell them. They didn't need to know. They would never want to go into that closet ever again. I get to the police station and they call our mother. Then they drive us home, and she leaves work early. They do another full search, but once again find nothing but the mess I made in my attempt to leave. No evidence. Nothing. They basically told me to stop wasting their time, and they left. My mother said she believed me, but of course I knew it was just something she would say to console me. She says I could stay the night at a friend's if I can get a hold of someone, just to make me feel better. We all go inside, and my mom sends my brothers to get cleaned up for bed. I walk over to the couch where I left my phone. It wasn't there though. It was on the floor, smashed to pieces. It was very obvious that it was smashed by a hammer, seeing as the hammer was sitting right next to it. I call my mother over and show her the mess of my phone on the ground. She walks over to the storage cabinet and pulls down the toolbox we have. She opens it, and our hammer is still inside. I didn't realize what that meant at the time, but now that I think about it, that man was in our home, in my closet, in my room, with a hammer, just waiting and hoping for me and my brothers to fall asleep. Let's not meet again, please. So to get into the neighborhood I grew up in, you'd have to drive down this old dirt road for a couple of miles and past some small farms. Right outside of our neighborhood entrance was a spooky house that was surrounded by a cluster of giant oak trees. A red and white Jeep from the 1960s sat outside, and there were never any lights on, and the blinds were always closed. Well, I ended up meeting the guy that lived there several times. Sometimes he slowly followed me in his Jeep while I was on my bike. One time he showed up at my house to watch me jump on my mini trampoline in my front yard and grabbed me by my arm. Other times he would sit in his Jeep at 6 a.m. and stare at me while I stood at the bus stop. My Uncle Dave is super awesome in a really goofy sort of way. He's always playing pranks on me. He once convinced me that a hot pepper was a pickle and got me to chow down on one of the chilies, which prompted me to wash my own mouth out with soap in the restroom. He lived in Connecticut, and when my family moved down south to this neighborhood, we didn't see him much. One weekend, after several encounters with that creepy guy, Uncle Dave announced that he was coming over to visit and would be staying in our guest room. My mom let me stay up and wait for him to arrive. However, seeing me fall asleep on the couch several times, she ordered me to go to bed and said I could see Uncle Dave when I woke up. In the middle of the night, I woke up with an eerie feeling. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and goosebumps covered my body. I had this uneasy feeling of being watched. Stiff as a board, not trying to move my head, I announced to the watcher that I am awake and aware of its existence. I moved my eyes around the room to look for anything out of the ordinary. My nightlight was in the corner of the room, which created a pretty decent glow in the room. It was really easy to make out my Beanie Baby collection, my desk, my dresser, and the man crouched next to my dresser. Okay, what the hell, my little mind thought. I could see a guy with dark hair sitting with his back against the wall, and his right side leaning against my dresser. His knees were pulled close to his body, and I could see his teeth and the whites of his eyes gleaming. He was facing me. I stared at him for a long time, and he didn't move. At first, I was terrified. Then I remembered Uncle Dave. Of course, he always plays pranks on me. It's his life mission. He's probably trying to trick me again. If I cry or scream, he'll jump up laughing and will shout, "Gotcha!" I can't let Uncle Dave win. I stared at him for a while, and he didn't move a muscle. He never gave up the game. It felt like hours, and I felt the sense of dread fill me. As much as Uncle Dave loves pranking me, I can't picture him staying up all night to do this weird, creepy prank. A small voice in my head tried to convince me that it was someone else, not Uncle Dave. I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. I peeked and saw that the man was still there. He wasn't a figment of my imagination. I closed my eyes and imagined myself shouting for my mom and how she dashed to rescue me. Even if it was my Uncle Dave, I wanted no part of this prank. At some point, after hours of adrenaline, I crashed and fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I immediately checked my dresser and saw no one. Feeling relief wash over me, I felt fully convinced it was Uncle Dave being dumb again. Leaping out of bed and rushing out of my room, I ran into the living room, gleefully shouting, "Ha ha, Uncle Dave, you didn't get me. That was the dumbest prank ever." My mom turned to me with a weird look on her face and told me that Uncle Dave was still in Connecticut because his flight was delayed. I figured my mom was just in on the prank and told her what happened, insisting that Uncle Dave was there. When she shook her head no, I felt a wave of horror flash over me as I tried to figure out who that was in my room. My mom told me I was just imagining things and she wouldn't entertain me. Flash forward a bit later. I'm again in bed, my nightlight's on. I somehow forgot about the creepy man and was more focused on stuff like Captain Planet and Game Boy. I woke up in the middle of the night with the same eerie feeling. I checked by the dresser, but didn't see anything. Feeling relieved, I settled back into bed and counted sheep. While laying there, I saw a slender hand creep up the side of my comforter from under the bed. It felt around, looking for something to grab onto. At that second, every alarm system in my body was screaming, except for my mouth. I tried so many times to open my mouth and shout, but nothing would come out. I felt paralyzed. The hand was on my bed for probably 5 minutes, but it felt like the longest 5 minutes of my life. I lay there petrified and fantasizing about running out of my room or calling for my mom, but I couldn't get my mouth or legs to work. Instead, I laid there, frozen like a wuss. I was eventually able to call for my mom, but in the middle of me shouting, "Mom!" my nightlight turned off. I don't remember what happened after that, but I think I fainted from fright. When I woke up, I stood up on my bed and took a flying leap, then ran out of my room to tell my mom what happened. My dad checked under my bed, and again told me it was just my imagination. Despite my mom trying to convince me I was crazy, I was firmly convinced that the man had been in my room not once, but twice. After that, I would start sprinting for my bedroom door and take a flying leap mid-room, landing with a thud on my bed. I was convinced if I did not do this, if I walked up to my bed like a normal person, someone hiding under my bed would grab my ankles. I had a bed skirt on my bed, so it was impossible to look underneath for any creepy lurkers. As time went on, other things happened. Some person stood in the pitch black of my backyard one night and made human meowing noises at my window. Someone tapped on my window. The screen of my window had been pried open, and I saw the red Jeep parked in front of my house several times. When I finally told my mom about the red Jeep, she went white and started making all these phone calls. Apparently, the guy who lived in the dark house had previously been accused of raping a child, but was never convicted, but was convicted of indecent exposure. The court took away his driver's license and had him register as a sex offender. When my mom heard that he was violating his conditions and following kids in the neighborhood in his car, she called the cops. The cops went to his house and ended up searching it. Inside, they found this weird wooden chair with a large hole on the seat. Allegedly, the guy would ask the neighborhood farm girls to sit on the chair, and he would just lay on the ground underneath the chair, looking up their dresses. Sometimes he would ask farm children to defecate through the hole and would promise gifts. One kid got a new bike out of it. Apparently all of the kids from the farms knew about this guy and his chair, but never reported him because they like getting free stuff. I don't know what his name is or where he is now. I tried Googling some keywords with my old neighborhood to see if anything pops up, but could never find anything. I also have no idea if he was a guy in my room. But after hearing about him and remembering how he would follow me to my house in his Jeep, I became pretty convinced he was a guy who had hid in my room twice. This happened to my wife's aunt, Sarah. I apologize that I can't relay her emotions, and at times have to skimp over a few details, as this is a secondhand account, as told by my wife. This was 10 to 15 years ago, and Sarah had been recently divorced. Her husband moved out, and Sarah continued living in the house by herself for some time after that. The house was in a typical neighborhood, and wasn't secluded or off by itself or anything like that. As Sarah became used to living alone, she felt like she kept hearing things in her attic, and began to wonder what was making the noises she heard. She called the police and had them come sweep her attic, looking for traces of anyone living up there, but they found nothing and told her it was probably just a raccoon or squirrel. In the days after the cops came to her house, she felt like the noises were getting louder, and there was no way it was a small animal. She called the police again about a week later, and the same thing happened. They didn't find anything yet again. A few days after she called the police the second time, Sarah came home from work earlier than usual. Fortunately for her, she had been dating during that time, and her boyfriend was with her when she came home that day. As she got out of her car in her garage, she noticed something was out of place and scary as hell at the door. A pair of muddy boots. I like to think that if she had been alone, she would have had enough sense not to enter the house at that point. But luckily, her boyfriend was with her. They cautiously enter the house and discover upon opening the door, a man standing naked in the laundry room doing his laundry. Sarah went to call the police, but the phone wasn't working, and she ended up going to the next door to use the phone. I'm a little fuzzy on the details here, but they managed to keep him in place until the police arrived, and they took him away. Turns out this guy had access to the house somehow, and he had indeed been spending time in the attic. The cops found a small hole in the attic above her bedroom, where he had been watching her, and on that day he cut the phone lines and put a knife under her pillow. God only knows what would have happened had she come home by herself, but thankfully that didn't happen. I don't know any more details about the guy, other than the fact that the cops took him away, and he presumably spent some time in jail. I grew up in a very small Wisconsin town with a lot of strange folk. I'm a petite female. I was living with my father and my younger sibling in an average home in town at the time. My grandparents frequently came over for shared dinners. I was a senior in high school, and for my final semester I was able to leave school an hour and a half earlier than usual, twice a week. I relished this time home alone, and would often use it to take long, hot showers, since no one could scold me for using all the hot water. One day I arrived home early, as usual. Even though it's a small town, I'm always very careful about locking the doors, because at the time we had a young neighborhood boy who thought my dad was really cool, since he always worked on cars, and would occasionally just walk into our house and ask my dad questions about cars. Weird, yes, but I knew he was still in school at this point, and I was just being proactive. So I get home, go upstairs to my room, and go into my walk-in closet. This is important. Get into my robe, and go back downstairs to the shower. Mid-shower, I hear what sounded like someone walking down the stairs, very loudly. We have pretty thin walls, and the stairs are on the other side of one of the bathroom walls. I knew that there was no way anyone was home, because my dad always worked late, and my sibling was still at school, and my grandparents only come around for dinner. But in an effort to try not to freak myself out, I just convinced myself that the clear footsteps were most certainly the house settling. None of this was helped by the fact that our bathroom didn't have a functional lock and anyone could have burst in. I searched the shower for the sharpest, most weapon-like shampoo bottle and quickly finished up. Still uncomfortably moist, in a flimsy old bathrobe, I decided to search the house, despite the creepy off feeling that practically everyone on Let's Not Meet has experienced. I quickly ran out over to our knife block and snatched up the meat cleaver, and proceeded to ninja my way through the house with the full logical intention of hacking the intruder. I searched every nook and cranny and didn't find anything downstairs. The doors were still locked, and since I didn't hear anyone go back upstairs, I figured the footsteps were just a figment of my imagination, and I calmed down a bit. When I got back to my room upstairs, and I'm about to walk into the closet, when I see something that immediately catches my eye. There's something white in the doorway, something that could not possibly have been there before. A crisp, white, gently placed, flattened pair of men's underwear. Someone had been, and may still be, in the house. Never in my life have I had such a pure flood of fear. Earlier I mentioned that I had walked into my closet to change into my bathrobe, so I would have noticed the pair of men's underwear in the doorway. I booked it downstairs and sat in the corner with a knife and a phone until my sibling and grandparents came a short while later. They were freaked out, but not too worried since we couldn't find anything else. And then it gets weirder. Later that night I tell my father about the incident and we decide to search the house for anything else out of the ordinary. While searching my dad's room, we noticed one of his dresser drawers was open, and this is unusual since he is very neat. And in this dresser drawer we found a newly opened multi-pack of men's underwear, with one missing. He had gotten this pack a few years ago, but they weren't quite what he wanted. So instead of returning them, he just left them in the bottom back of his dresser, completely forgetting about them. So someone got in, or already was in our house, opened a pack of men's underwear that was in the back of my dad's bottom dresser drawer, took one of the pairs of underwear out, and gently placed it in my closet doorway while I was showering. was a weird underwear closet guy in my house. Let's not meet. In the 1980s, my aunt used to volunteer at a prison, teaching inmates how to read. She was an elementary school teacher and cared a lot about education. She did this for a long time, until one of the prisoners became infatuated with her. It started out small, by complimenting her, but then he began to tell her how much in love with her he was, and how he was planning a life for them outside of prison. My aunt told the guards about this, and they suggested she stop volunteering at the prison. On occasion, she would get phone calls from the prison, and love letters. She never accepted any of the calls, and didn't return his letters either. She went on with her life, ignoring him because he was behind bars and couldn't hurt her, until he escaped from prison. My aunt was out of town when she got a call that he had escaped. She called the local police immediately and asked them to check the house with her when she got back. My aunt lives alone in a ranch-style house, so the police surveyed outside, checked the basement and the main floor, and found nothing. Her home security system was intact as well. So she had a friend stay the night, and everything seemed okay. Around 1 a.m. they hear scratching noises and called the police. They thought the noises were coming from her mother's empty bedroom. The police came and they searched the outside of the house and the bedroom and found nothing. Around 2:30 they heard scratching noises again. They also heard what sounded like footsteps. The police then checked the attic, which was more like a crawl space that my aunt used for storage. When they checked the attic, they found the prisoner, crouched behind a box with a screwdriver, a hacksaw blade, and 2 blades from a pair of hedge cutters. He had gotten to the house by slitting a window that gave him access to the attic, and he is still currently in prison and will be until he dies. Hello, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit that thumbs up, subscribe if you aren't already subscribed, and let me know what you think in the comments. I like when you guys comment because then I know who watched, and then I watch you. Till next time.